Imagine this. The lease in your current apartment is about to end and you have to move out in 2 weeks. You're looking for a job for the upcoming quarter in a tough market. You're working on your master's degree. You're pursuing your passions on the side and you're trying to maintain all your relationships with the people you care about. This is your life in this moment. Frankly, you're not so sure if a solution is coming. And if one is, you don't know from where, you don't know how, and you don't know when. So, with hope, faith as small as a mustard seed, and desperation as large and palpable as a mountain, you decide to pray and more aggressively look for a new place. You find some promising spots, but they're almost all out of your budget range, far from your campus, in a dangerous area, or taken off the market at the last minute. In this moment, you are frustrated, tired, and overwhelmed, but you know you must find a solution and move forward. What do you do? Well, I'll tell you what I did. And while I do that, let me share some lessons I learned while going through this process. Lesson number 1, you cannot expect to receive what you have not asked for. What do I mean? Well, before I moved to this spot, I was looking elsewhere. This spot wasn't necessarily even on my radar. You see, I had scheduled many tours only to have some units taken off the market at the last minute, or to have the agents not even show up for the showing. That's kind of crazy, but after all this frustration and disappointment, I still had to look for jobs and do well in school. It's fair to say that I was reasonably stressed out. And like I said before, I had 2 weeks to find a place and make a decision, but I had nothing. So I decided to go to the gym to relieve some stress. And on my way there, I saw the real estate agent who owns this current unit I'm in right now. So in the spur of the moment, I decided to ask him if he had any units available. He said to text him and wait for a response. I wasn't really expecting one, but I did exactly that. And a few days later, I had a response. Surprise. And eventually ended up in me landing a new spot after some uncertainty and negotiation. You see, I never would have known the outcome if I never asked. But because I did, I found exactly what I was looking for, by God's grace, of course. This leads me to lesson number 2, fresh start syndrome. Now you might be asking, David, what the heck is that? Well, the fresh start syndrome is a psychological phenomenon that describes how people are more likely to pursue goals and make positive changes at certain times, such as the beginning of the new year, a new week, or a new month. For me, this fresh start is not really related to a time, but rather a place. You see, after finding this new place, I have this idea of what I'm going to be doing once I move there. I have this ideal version of how things will go on a daily basis. And I believe that this move will grant me with a new space to grow into the ideal version of myself. But then I realized, if I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do here, what makes me think I'll magically do it over there? I realized that no matter where I go, I am responsible for forming and maintaining positive habits. No new information, no new surroundings, and no new people can magically change that. Of course, they can influence and steer me in a better direction, but in the end, I hold the steering wheel. And if I don't drive towards the person that I want to be, all I'll have is a working GPS, but no motion. And no one can accuse me of having no motion. I'm sorry. Like I was saying, I have a working GPS, but no motion. And eventually, if I keep driving in circles or taking the wrong turns long enough, I might run out of fuel and I might not be able to find my way back. Or at the very least, it will make it that much more difficult to do so. It will make it that much more difficult to actually change. And speaking of change, this brings me to lesson number 3. I realize that I'm very reluctant to change. I'm not a big fan. And this is ironic since I've moved multiple times as a child and even in my adult life, but not just from apartments, but from cities, countries, and even entire continents. And I think I was able to do this because it was pure necessity, because my parents were moving, so I didn't, really have a choice to do so. But I realized that with the choices that are up to me, I'm less likely to be enthusiastic about that change. And this reluctance to change is not innately bad, I don't think, but I think allowing it to control how I think or live is where the issue lies. You see, we all have comfort zones, and choosing to stay in those comfort zones for a prolonged period can lead to stagnation, which is no growth, or it can lead to a decline. And like I said, resistance to change is normal and understandable. But I know that to grow, it is necessary that we overcome that resistance and move past that fear that keeps us in that comfort zone. At some point, we must move. And speaking of moving, this brings me to lesson number 4. It is unwise to move from one place to another with the same baggage or burdens. You see, initially when I moved into this room, it wasn't large enough for all my belongings. And because of those limitations, I was unable to, and frankly, unwilling to unpack everything. So when I had to move my things to the new place, it made the things I hadn't packed easier to move. But I realized two things. Number one, when I was living in the first place here, there were some things that I couldn't find. For example, this hat. Now, I've been looking for this hat for so long because I was so sad and annoyed that I couldn't find it. And I was annoyed because it was something my father gave to me as a gift. So low-key, high-key was something that meant a lot to me. And although this item was in my possession, my room was in disarray. And I realized that one is less likely to find what they seek in chaos, no matter the scale of that chaos. I don't know why that sounded so philosophical, but you get my point. Let's move on. The second thing I realized with the baggage I never unpacked is that some of the things I came in with initially now no longer serve me. They aren't important anymore, so it makes the moving process longer than necessary. And I know it sounds like a paradox because I said the items that were never unpacked were easier to move, and now I'm saying it makes the moving process longer. But it's not really paradoxical if you think about it. You see, the things we never truly unpack or heal from remain with us, and you get used to them being there. It is a burden we're familiar with. So if we're required to move that baggage to a new location, it's not a difficult task per se, but it makes the process of moving in its entirety an unnecessarily longer and more difficult one. I think this point about baggage that is never unpacked applies especially to relationships, whether it's a relationship with God, it's a relationship with others, or even, and to be honest, especially with ourselves. Our growth is made more difficult by our unwillingness to unpack or rid ourselves of the baggage or burdens we've carried for so long. And going into relationships with that baggage doesn't just harm us, but it harms the other person. Because for me, how I view relationships, whether romantic or platonic, is that I am entering a sort of contract with this person that I will not betray your love and trust that you have for me, and you will do the same. Like, we're both on the same contract. So to me, if I'm coming in with a certain baggage that I know will harm that person, and I still go ahead with it anyways, my conscience, my spirit won't allow me to. And there's a Bible verse that talks about how we shouldn't be unequally yoked with people. So I understand the context of that, but to me, when I sit there and think, okay, if I'm going to enter, for instance, a romantic relationship with someone, if I'm struggling with a very dangerous vice that causes me to just not be myself, like if I'm an alcoholic, right, it won't help me, it's not helping me. And if I get into a relationship with someone else, they have to now deal with that burden. Now, I'm not saying you have to be perfect, but I'm saying you have to work on yourself to a certain degree, that you are in a place where you can invite someone else into your space or into kind of relationship with you without hurting them in a certain way. Obviously, we're not perfect, right? You're going to hurt someone. But I think we're less likely to hurt that person or less likely to betray their trust and love if we deal with certain things or we unpack certain things that we haven't unpacked. And this topic of relationships doesn't just relate to other people, but like I said, it relates to ourselves. If we don't get rid of our baggage and we keep walking around with ourselves, we start to lose trust with ourselves. We don't see ourselves as ourselves anymore. We lose a sense of ourselves. We lose our identity as we keep carrying that burden on us. It becomes a part of us. And the thing about this baggage is that it's possibly grown to a point where we would need actual assistance to help us rid ourselves of that baggage, or at least it would make it easier to do so. And this brings me to point number 5. I've realized that even though I could have moved everything in here by myself, it wouldn't really be wise or efficient to do so. Just because I can doesn't mean I should. It says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23 that you say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is good for you. You say I'm allowed to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Now, obviously, there is a specific context that this is for, and it was used, and you can read the whole chapter to understand. But I wanted to borrow the words because I find that this articulates the point better than I can. Like I said, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you can doesn't mean it's good for you. And I understand that it would have been wise and inefficient to do this moving all by myself. So I had some friends to help me out, and that sped up the process and allowed me to spend time with the people I cared about. You see, in the end, I'm not sure what awaits me after this move. There is still much uncertainty in my life and I have a lot of growing to do. But with these 5 lessons, or rather realizations, I have made a resolve to control what is in my control and leave the uncontrollable to God. Basically, do my best, and let God handle the rest. I look forward to the content I will be making, the testimonies I will be sharing, and most importantly, I look forward to doing what I can every day to be the light and salt of the world in everything I do, and to do whatever I do for the glory of God. And if you'd like to do the same, I ask that you subscribe and join me on this journey. I am not a teacher. I am not someone who knows everything or has everything figured out, but I reckon that on my way to figuring things out, you can witness that and learn something in real time. If you're not interested, fair enough. But if you are interested, thank you for joining me on this journey. I'll see you in the next one. And as always, Godspeed. That was supposed to be much, much smoother. I failed. Let's try that again. Hold on. And as always, Godspeed. And as always, Godspeed.